Hello, students. Best wishes to everyone. This is the third video of the chapter The Rise of the Nationalism in Europe. I am here to explain about the making of nationalism in Europe. Before we start learning the same, let us recall what we learned in the last video. In the last video, I explained about the French Revolution and the idea of nation which was first emerged during the French Revolution with the idea of la patrie and les citoyens. Later we learnt about the changes introduced by Napoleon through Civil Code of 1804. There was establishment of universal laws, standardized weights and measures, and common national currency which benefited each and every section of the society. Now in this video, we are going to learn that how these universal laws, standardized weights and measures helped different people for making of nationalism in Europe. Let me start with the structure of European society. How the society of Europe was divided and the making of nationalism in Europe. Germany, Italy, and Switzerland were divided into kingdoms, duchies, and cantons in mid 18th century, whose rulers had their autonomous territories. Here, duchies and canton means, in the reference I have given, canton means it is a subdivision of a territory for the purpose of administration in some countries. And duchies means these are the territories which are ruled by a duke or a duchess. They did not share a collective identity or a common culture. They even spoke different languages and belonged to different ethnic groups. For example, the Habsburg Empire that ruled over Austria Hungary was a patchwork of many different regions and peoples. Some important factors led to the rise of nationalism in Europe are: the first one, the rise of new middle class, the spread of the ideology of liberalism, the new spirit of conservatism, and the Treaty of Vienna, and the rise of revolutionaries. So in this video we will discuss and learn about the rise of the new middle class and the spread of the ideology of liberalism. The structure of European society. European society was divided into three groups: aristocracy, peasantry, and the new middle class. Aristocracies were socially and politically a landed aristocracy was the dominant class on the continent, Europe. The members of this class were united by a common way of life that cut across regional divisions. They owned estates in the countryside and also town houses. They spoke French for purpose of diplomacy, and in high societies also they used to speak French. Their families were often connected by ties of marriages. This powerful aristocracy was, however, numerically a small group, enjoyed all the rights. The next group they had was peasantry. The majority of the population was made up of the peasantry, and to the west, the bulk of the land was formed by tenants and small owners, while in Eastern and Central Europe, the pattern of landholding was characterized by vast estates which were cultivated by the slaves or serfs. The third group was the new middle class, which was called as commercial classes. Commercial classes focused on production, and production was done for the market. They were educated population of industrialists, doctors, teachers, businessmen, professionals, etc. In Central and Eastern Europe, they were in small in number. Liberal middle classes focused on liberal nationalism. What does it mean? What did liberal nationalism stand for? Different people had a different idea about liberalism. First of all, we need to know from where the term is driven. The term liberalism derives from the Latin word liber, meaning free. For the new middle classes, you can see the new middle classes. What did liberal nationalism mean? It meant freedom for the individual, equality of all before the law, and politically, liberalism stood concept of government by consent. And in the 19th century, stressed the inviolability of private property. According to French Revolution, liberalism was end of autocracy and clerical privileges, a constitution and representative government through parliament. Liberals in the 19th century stressed the inviolability of private property. So different people had different notions of liberalism. So a term disturbed the people, equality of all before the law. And this was a question mark during that time. To understand the equality of all before the law, we have some points here. Equality before the law did not stand for universal suffrage because in revolutionary France, first experiment in liberal democracy was done and it granted the right to vote and to get elected exclusively to property owning men, and they were called as active citizens. Men without property and all women were excluded from political rights, and they were called as passive citizens. But during the time of Jacobins, during the French Revolution, all adult males enjoyed the universal suffrage. And once again, when Napoleon came to power, this right was taken away when Napoleonic Code of 1804 or the Civil Code of 1804 was announced by Napoleon, and this code limited the suffrage and women were in the status of a minor subject to the authority of fathers and husbands. We have already learned in the French Revolution. And during 19th century, women and non-propertied men organized movements demanding equal political rights. And this was the equality of all before the law, and this is how the new middle classes focused on liberalism. And for them, liberalism meant freedom for the individual and equality of all before the law. Let us know what was liberalism for a economic sphere or economic group or a commercial group. Liberalism stood for the freedom of markets. For the commercial classes or economic classes, liberalism stood for the freedom of markets and the abolition of state imposed restrictions on the movement of goods and capital. Because they were merchants, businessmen, they had to go from one place to the another place carrying their goods for sales. So for them, liberalism stood for the freedom of markets, because freedom of markets were not given, because every state and country had their own weights and measures. So that is why the merchants and businessmen had no rights to go freely to other states to sell their goods and have the currency exchanged. For example, let us take the example of the German speaking regions in the first half of the 19th century. Napoleon's administrative measures had created out of countless small principalities a confederation of 39 states at that time. Each of these states possessed its own currency and weights and measures. A merchant traveling in the year 1833, from Hamburg to Nuremberg to sell his goods would have had to pass through 11 customs barriers and pay a customs duty of about 5% at each one of them. So, a merchant who used to travel from Hamburg to Nuremberg to sell his goods had to pass 11 states, 11 customs, and he had to pay different measures and weights in all these 11 states. Duties were often levied according to the weights or measurement of the goods. As each region had its own system of weights and measures, this involved time consuming calculation. And the measure of cloth, for example, was the LA, which in each region stood for a different length. LA means length. An LA of textile material bought in Frankfurt would get you 54.7 सेंटीमीटर ऑफ क्लोथ. तो फ्रैंकफर्ट में एक LA का मतलब 54.7 सेंटीमीटर ऑफ क्लोथ है. सेम थिंग इन मेन्स 55.1 centimeter, and same measure if you take in a Nuremberg, it is 65.6 centimeter. Same measurement is different in different states according to their weights and measures. And in a Freiburg, 53.5 centimeter. Such conditions were viewed as obstacles to economic exchange and growth by the new commercial classes, who argued for the creation of a unified economic territory along with the unhindered movement of goods, people, and capital. In 1834, a customs union or Zollverein was formed at the initiative of Prussia and joined by most of the German states. The Union abolished tariff barriers and reduced the number of currencies from over 30 to 2. And the creation of a network of railway further stimulated mobility of goods and currencies, harnessing economic interest to national unification. A wave of economic nationalism strengthened the wide nationalist sentiments growing at the time in Europe. That's all for today's learning. In the next video, I will explain about the new spirit of conservatism and the Treaty of Vienna and the rise of revolutionaries. So, students, write the notes in your copy neatly and keep the copy when the school reopens. Your copies will be checked, or I may be asking you in the next week. So, till then, thank you. Have a nice day.